relationship was the mystery. Now I know Batman is just some boring rich asshole with parental issues.
That's really reductive.
If there's any movie that needs no introduction, it's this one. The Dark Knight is one of the most revered superhero movies of all time. When it released back in 2008, it blew audiences away and became a pop culture sensation overnight.
I'm the Joker, baby!
But 2008 was a long time ago. Superhero movies have changed, and the title of Best Superhero Movie is way more competitive than it used to be. Normally, I'd propose a question like, do you think The Dark Knight holds up after so long? But like, come on. You know it's good, I know it's good, even the US government knows it's good. Instead, we'll chat about why it's so good. You'd think that's pretty obvious, but if that were the case, Warner Bros. Would have cracked the code by now. And for anyone checking this out, this is a follow-up to my Batman Begins video. It's not required viewing, but it will get referenced here and there. Check it out whenever you have the time. The cool thing about The Dark Knight is that it fixes almost every issue in Batman Begins. While there is still some dumb stuff,
I'm not wearing hockey pads.
there's not going to be nearly as much to pick apart. It's just that good. Some flaws will seem nitpicky, and I hope you understand that's not my goal. I love this movie, just like many of you. But we gotta be fair. And in the end, this movie is beloved for a reason. It's the golden goose Warner Bros. Has been chasing for years, and time will tell if they can catch it again. So, something I've talked about before was this notion of the superhero's first movie. Part of the movie is focused on their backstory or motivation, and once they don the suit, we pivot to something that puts the hero to the test. But I haven't mentioned the issues with this formula. Origin stories need to spend enough time getting us invested into the character. Simple enough, sure, but that alone is easy to screw up.
Her?
And when you add villain shenanigans, world building, or romance to the mix, it gets more complicated. That's a lot even for a skilled writer. It's one of the reasons there's such a wide range from Thor to Spider-Verse. But superhero sequels are where the fun begins. Because there's no origin baggage, the writers have more freedom to write a compelling story. This is why sequels like The Dark Knight are so good. This movie is one giant test of resolve for all the heroes. The first act revolves around the final push for Gotham's salvation. Bruce and Gordon spent roughly a year cleaning up Gotham, and it shows. The Gotham we saw in Begins was this dirty, grimy mess you could practically smell through the screen, and it gets a really nice glow up in The Dark Knight. The only thing left to take care of are the remaining crime lords. Gordon mentioned some other guy causing trouble in the neighborhood, but Batman just kinda goes,
And that sounds like it's not my problem.
The first act is a lot like a classic Batman story. Beating up criminals, rooftop rendezvous with Gordon, and Bruce Wayne flexing his wealth.
Sure that they'll let us. Oh, they should. I own the place.
Kind of like what we saw in Batman Begins. But you can see the difference it makes when there's no origin story to worry about. The middle chunk of Batman Begins is good, but it suffers from being slapped onto the origin story. It doesn't really have time to evolve in a satisfying way. If anything, it devolves. Which is the opposite of what we see in The Dark Knight. Since the Batman capers are at the start, it has time to escalate beyond your average Batman caper. And speaking of escalation, I couldn't think of a better word to describe the transition into the second act. Through the combined efforts of Gordon, Batman, and Harvey Dent, hundreds of criminals are locked up. Gotham's future is looking brighter than ever. Until... While I haven't talked about him so far, the Joker is just as important as the others in Act 1. As much as the first act is about the heroes working together, it's also about the Joker's rise to power. Even though we saw how much of a threat he is, both the mob,
Two-bit whack job, wears a cheap purple suit and makeup. He's not the problem, he's a nobody.
and Batman don't take him seriously. By the time they realize what he's capable of,
I've made a huge mistake.
it's too late. For this version of Mr. J, the Nolans pulled inspiration from famous comics like The Killing Joke.
Sometimes I remember it one way, sometimes another. If I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice.
They threw in some other inspirations too, like the German 1933 film The Testament of Dr. Mabuse.
Introduce a little anarchy.
Together, it creates a Joker that's both radically different from past versions, yet still really familiar. And of course, we can't talk about the Joker without talking about the man behind the makeup. Heath Ledger did a phenomenal job bringing this character to life. It's unreal how much work he put into this performance. Everything from researching the source material to spending weeks alone writing the Joker's thoughts in a diary. I'll link a few articles in the description. It's incredible how much work he put in. And it shows. He steals a scene every time he shows up.
I'm a man of my word.
You know performance is good when you overshadow such a star-studded ensemble. But before I get carried away, the Joker's first murders start the second act. The tension ramps up as the Joker moves from average citizens to high-profile targets, with Batman doing his best to hunt him down. And the dynamic between Batman and the Joker is what makes this movie so good.
Wayne Tech promised an electric car by this year. I put a deposit down. Where's my goddamn electric car, Bruce?
I'm of the opinion that any Joker needs Batman to really shine. You can use the Joker elsewhere, sometimes really well,
Cinnamon raisins? You know I hate raisins!
and other times not so much, but taking Batman out of the equation loses what makes the Joker a great antagonist. I know the obvious counterpoint is Joker, but even though it's good, you have to admit it's barely a Joker movie. It's a lot more like Taxi Driver than any Joker story. And I say that as someone who likes both movies. The Dark Knight has all the hallmarks of what makes this dynamic a classic. The dichotomy of a good but flawed person and the embodiment of true evil has fantastic storytelling potential. Because as evil as the Joker is, he needs someone equally good to oppose him. Many of the best Batman and Joker stories revolve around how far the Joker will push Batman, and how much is too much for Bruce, just like The Dark Knight. But as much as I love this pair, it is really overused these days. You see the Joker so often, and it's usually the same old, "We're not so different, you and I," spiel that we always hear from the Joker, which isn't even true by the way, but it happens so often people take it as fact nowadays. I wouldn't mind if the Joker took a hiatus for a little bit. You know, maybe give some of the other villains a chance to shine, like Phantom or Man-Bat. But let's be real, you know Warner Brothers isn't letting that happen. That aside, the other cool thing about this movie is that it feels like a true ensemble. The Dark Knight is as much a Harvey Dent and Gordon story as it is a Batman one. I didn't talk much about Gordon last time, but The Dark Knight is when he really comes into his own. He gets overlooked because, well, look at his friends, but he's awesome in this movie. His quick judgment saves lives on multiple occasions, and he's the one that comes up with the plan to catch the Joker. And while his progression isn't as obvious as Harvey's, it does show later.
I want Lau alive. The Joker, either way.
Jim, by the book, Gordon, is ready to kill the Joker. I kinda wish the movie made a bigger deal about that. It's easy to miss since there's so much going on, but it's cool that even Gordon is pushed to his limit. Anywho, Gordon's death forces Bruce and Harvey's hand, leading to Harvey taking the fall for Batman. A chase ensues, culminating in a thematic showdown between our hero and villain. And after Batman remembers killing is wrong, Gordon pulls a fast one on the Joker, which ends up being part of the Joker's master plan anyways, somehow. And after a game of good cop Batman, the Joker reveals the next stage of his plan.
Choose between one life or the other. Your friend, the district attorney, or his blushing bride to be.
And as a result of the Joker's reads, Rachel dies. And Harvey's sanity goes with her. As our heroes mourn, this is a good time to discuss one of the film's weaker parts.
The Batman.
The Dark Knight himself doesn't really change much in this movie, at least compared to the last one. But I don't think that's a bad thing. As you'd expect of a good Batman-Joker story, Batman is forced into situations without easy answers. He has to rely on his strength of will and resourcefulness to make it through. Batman going through drastic change might undermine the entire story. But as good as Batman is in this movie, this is when some of the writing lets him down. And it's a similar problem we see in Batman Begins. Begins did a good job exploring Bruce's backstory and motivation. In other words, the bare minimum for the character. It's really well done and easily the best part of the movie, but it's here where you see the limitations of doing the bare minimum for a character. A big thing I pointed out in Batman Begins was how it would have benefited from showing more of Bruce's personality. While he has a personality,
I trust you don't have me followed on my day off.
If you ever took one, I might.
being sassy with your friends isn't enough in the long run. The audience needs a little more to really connect with a character. Bale's Batman is good, but there's a reason this Batman didn't resonate with people like many of the Marvel heroes did. Batman Begins and The Dark Knight don't highlight why we should root for Batman, other than him being the hero to the villain. Something I didn't talk about last time was this whole idea of Batman as a symbol. It's one of the recurring themes across the trilogy, but audiences don't connect with symbols, they connect with people. Batman goes through a lot in this movie. He talks about how difficult things are, but we don't really get a chance to hear how he feels. He's stoic and resolute all the way to the end, to a fault. For example, this is his reaction to Rachel's death.
She was gonna wait for me, Alfred. Dad doesn't know.
My guy, your best friend just got turned into paste. Could you do a little better than like a single tear? A common complaint I've seen is that Bale's Batman is boring, and that The Dark Knight is really the Joker movie. And as much as I'd like to disagree, I kind of get it. Batman's personality is really subdued.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
And he's not really given much else to compensate in this movie. Both Begins and Rises give Bruce a little more introspection, and Bale gets more scenes to show off his acting chops. A scene like Batman expressing more emotion might seem really minor, but moments like that are crucial for getting us to connect with the character.
I know I made a promise, but I didn't see this coming. I didn't count on being happy.
They show there's a human worth rooting for underneath the mask. And you don't even need to do big emotional scenes. It's not like more emotion save the next movie. Little things like kindness or empathy would go a long way. And no, the whole "hey kid, you like Wayne Tech" scene doesn't count. There should be some actual human bonding.
Since you indoctrinated Robin into crime fighting at the ripe old age of 9.
Robin needed to help bring the men who murdered his family to justice.
So he could turn out like you?
So that he wouldn't.
If that was the Batman we saw more of in The Dark Knight, more people would actually be invested in this character, instead of being swept off their feet by the Joker. You don't even have to look far into Batman lore for a solution. There's more than enough to work with in The Dark Knight. Out of the entire trilogy, this is the one where he gets to be a real hero. He tries his hardest to save people throughout the movie. I know saving people is part of the job description, but it's easy to overlook when there's so much else going on in the movie. Especially since the movie doesn't make a big deal out of it. And in another change from some Batman, this Batman is really idealistic.
This city just showed you that it's full of people ready to believe in good.
There's some good in this world, Joker. And it's worth fighting for.
Most versions are really grumpy and pragmatic, but this one has so much faith in humanity. It's a little too unfounded if you really think about it. You can tell there's an amazing Batman in here that audiences would adore. The Nolans and Ledger put so much work into the Joker, and it paid off in spades. And they probably could have put a little more effort into Batman as well. Just because you did a good job last time, mind you, good, not great, you shouldn't ignore the main character of your movie. Batman embodies the best of humanity by the end of this movie. He deserves more than being labeled a boring character with a silly voice. And at the same time, it's not like the movie highlights his heroism as much as I did. He gets overshadowed by both the Joker and Harvey Dent. And even though I spent the last few minutes complaining about Batman, I still don't think he's that bad. Putting characters in impossible situations is one of my favorite story beats. And that's exactly what this movie is for Batman. As stoic and underwritten he is. It says a lot when a movie's weaker part is still pretty good. In any case, the second act concludes with Dent's talk with the Joker and the announcement of the Joker's final plan.
When it comes to human ethics, I just know more than you.
And it's here when Dent makes his full turn into Two-Face. He's pretty good for a third act villain. While the Joker is Batman's opposite, this version of Two-Face is more like his Dark Mirror, a fellow vigilante also pursuing justice, albeit in a twisted way. Dent works really well as the Act 1 good boy and the second villain in Act 3. There's only one thing that kind of sucks about him: Rachel. Despite how much I complained about her last time, I don't think she's that bad here. It's partly because she isn't around as long, but Maggie G does a really good job with her limited time. She's not nearly as wooden as Katie Holmes was.
The man who vanished
He never came back at all.
Harvey may not know you well enough to understand when you're making fun of him, but I do.
No, I meant every word.
But like the last movie, it's the writing that lets her down. And it affects Harvey because his entire fall from grace is because of Rachel. And honestly, it's a little hard to buy it. Kind of like another character.
What have I done?
These two aren't that bad on screen, but when you think about it, they only knew each other for about a year. Rachel's supposed to be a substitute for Mrs. Dent like in The Long Halloween, but it doesn't have quite the same effect. I don't think their relationship is unbelievable per se, and it's not like we have 3 more hours to build it up, but it is pretty hard to care about this relationship as much as Harvey does. And boy, does Harvey care.
He's gonna kill Rachel.
Rachel! Rachel! Rachel!
Apparently he cared way more than she did.
I'm going to marry Harvey Dent.
On one hand, you have really good scenes like Harvey's breakdown in the hospital. It's such a good example of wordless storytelling. And then he says things like,
"Where my family died."
And it's hard to take him seriously. Come on, Chris, you can write better than that. Then again,
I'm the protagonist of this operation.
And this rolls over into another issue. A common trend in every Nolan movie is his reliance on telling over showing. While it's not as bad in The Dark Knight like some of his other movies, it's still here. Harvey's love for Rachel is one example, but the other big one is Gotham City. There's a lot of emphasis on Gotham the city, but not really a lot on Gotham the people. We're told that Harvey gives the people hope and that the city desperately needs him. You think it's something that's really minor, but it's something that the movie makes a big deal out of, and we're only told about it through snippets of dialogue.
Gotham needs a hero with a face.
You're the symbol of hope I could never be.
Batman gets a fan club, but Harvey would benefit from one too, or at the very least, the perspective of the average Gotham citizen. That sounds a heck of a lot better than the scenes with Reese or the comic relief cop.
I didn't sign up for this! You can't stop here, we're like sitting ducks! I'm gonna be a comedian!
You could work this into other parts of the movie too. Bruce has a lot of faith in the people of Gotham, and we don't get a chance to see Gotham's goodness until the very end. It'd be pretty cool if the film showed the people of Gotham at their best, as well as at their worst. It'd add more basis to Bruce's beliefs, and create another layer of ambiguity to the finale. If we saw how good they can be earlier, there'd be more guessing as to whether good or evil will triumph by the end. And while I did just point out a few flaws, I don't think they're genuine problems. The story being told is still engaging and well written. Dent's arc and thematic relevance are still interesting in spite of how silly his downfall is. And Eckhart's performance is so good, it saves some of the shaky writing.
How does that feel?
I wouldn't!
And as unfounded as Batman's faith in humanity is, it's a great contrast to the Joker's beliefs. There's way more to love about this movie than there is to hate. It's like what I said about an underwritten Batman. It says a lot when the most you can say is,
"Please, sir, I want some more."
And speaking of love, the climax in The Dark Knight is one of the best in any superhero movie. The fight to the Joker escalates as new elements like the fake hostages and the SWAT team are introduced. The choreography is still dumb, but it's way easier to ignore this time. It's actually really cool watching Batman try his hardest to fight and save everyone in the building. And while this is going on, the prisoner's dilemma with the boats adds additional stakes and tension to the battle. Not only are Batman's skills pushed to their limit, but the fairies are the final clash of his ideals versus the Joker's. It takes so much of what made the movie good, like escalation and the character dichotomies, and uses it to create a thematically rich final battle. It's the kind of climax I wanted from Batman Begins, and I'm so glad Nolan was able to deliver here. But as good as the climax is, there's still more. The showdown with Two-Face is the real finale, and it's a fitting thematic conclusion to the film. We started the movie with these three, and it's only fitting that it ends with them. Like many of the movie's best scenes, it brings the character arcs and underlying themes to the forefront. Batman and Gordon come face to face with their worst fears, and when all is said and done, Batman is forced to take action one more time. I complained about Batman not saving Ra's last time because it's just so out of character. Begins goes out of its way to set up Batman's one rule, only for him to throw it in the trash at the end. But I don't think that's a problem this time around. We've seen Batman do whatever it takes to save people throughout the movie. If an innocent person's life is at stake, it makes sense for Batman to do what needs to be done, even if that means breaking his one rule. While he chose to let Ra's die, he didn't choose to kill Dent. He chose to save Gordon Jr. I know it's not a huge distinction, but it's a distinction nonetheless. And in the aftermath, things couldn't be bleaker for the heroes. Gotham's beacon of hope is tainted, and Batman himself has lost friends, allies, even his one rule is broken. But at the end, he's still standing. Despite how much he's lost, he's still willing to do whatever it takes for the greater good.
I killed those people. That's what I can be.
No, you can't. You're not.
I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be.
Not because it's his job, but because it's the right thing to do. And if that's not heroic, I don't know what is. I think it's beautiful that at the end of such a grim movie, there's that one ray of hope to cling to. That despite how much you lose and how much people can change, there are still those who remain strong. It's hard to believe that there's more hope in a Batman movie than any Superman movie that followed.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
There's a lot we can argue about when it comes to movies, but The Dark Knight is rarely one of them. It takes characters we know and uses them to tell a story rife with transient morality, loss, and most importantly, hope. It's a superhero movie that doesn't feel like a superhero movie. And yet, it wouldn't be the same without those heroes and villains. And in a lot of ways, I owe my love of movies to this one. It's one of the movies that made me look at films a little differently. It sounds cheesy, I know, but if I didn't watch this film at the right time, there's a good chance I never even bothered with movies like Citizen Kane or Singing in the Rain. And I wouldn't be surprised if anyone watching has a similar story. And it's like I said at the intro, the crown of best superhero movie is so much more competitive now. While that's a fun discussion worth having another day, there's not a doubt in my mind this movie will always be one of my favorites. And I'm sure many people out there feel exactly the same. And as much as I love The Dark Knight, I'm excited for the day a Batman movie comes along that's even better. Because it sure as hell wasn't the next one.
You're probably wondering to yourself, hey Bane, why no door? Because where would you escape to? You are in a pit!